Right, well, as you've already witnessed, I'm something of a kind of fraud and a charlatan when it comes to effective teaching, and I feel both kind of slightly embarrassed that standing up here and speaking such to an august group of teachers, but also very honoured to have been asked to come and talk to you. It's a very great pleasure to be here. And I am absolutely not a pedagogical expert. I'm from that generation of university teachers who spent 3 years entirely on their own in a library, reading dusty books and then writing their own soon-to-become dusty book, and completely unencumbered by any research training either. And on the basis of this kind of hermit-like existence, I was deemed appropriate to stand up in front of groups of students and teach them. And that's the sort of baying mob that I first encountered. Things are, of course, very different now, and one of the reasons why you're all here is because universities take the learning experience of the students and the associated teaching skills and techniques of those who are providing that experience much more seriously. Despite this rather unpromising foundation stone for my teaching career, things kind of seem to work out all right, kind of by accident, and there's the sort of view that many people in this room are used to seeing at the end of their lectures. By hook or by crook, my students seem to be quite satisfied and seem to quite enjoy the teaching that they were being faced with. But for many years, I never really thought about the style of my teaching or the techniques that I was employing. As you all know, particularly in the early stages of your career, it's a very hand-to-mouth experience. You're garnering the material, hoping that it's up to date and in the right order, and then sort of spewing it out. And as the years go by and you become more familiar with the material, you then have a little bit more leisure to think about what works and what doesn't work, what you've been told is effective in terms of engaging students, and what isn't. So I was invited at my previous university after a number of years to address an audience much like this, the annual Teaching and Learning Conference, on the subject of lecturing. And that meant that I really had to think about it and make sure I had something vaguely informed and joined up to say. And it occurred to me, having actually stood back and thought about the nature of teaching, that it is essentially a performance. As a lecturer, you are perhaps fundamentally a performer. And given that, what is it about that performance that is more attractive to a student, or should be more attractive to a student, than finding the information on the given topic through the medium of a book or a webinar or a podcast or some other reason? Why should our students come into a physical space and be faced with a person on a stage rather than learning in some other way? We tend to be rather apologetic about lectures and lecturing and lecture spaces. Much time and energy goes into turning our lecturing spaces into other sorts of spaces for engagement. There's a sort of coyness about the traditional sage on a stage thing, so we reorganise our furniture, we replace our furniture with furniture in bright colours and on wheels, because that's much more fun, and try to engage between staff and students in different ways. But if we think back to our own student days, or at least if I think back to my own student days, the teaching I really remember, the things that made an impact and have lived with me, are not those seminars and workshops and attempts to turn the desks around so people are facing each other. They're rather the big set pieces where somebody fully informed about their topic, enthused, and made me and other members of the audience feel that this was something important and valuable and exciting, something that I want to go and find out more about myself. And that's because in part at least, the traditional lecture is a public performance. It is an experience. And that whole experience is predicated on the relationship between performer and audience. If we look at a lecture theatre of a rather traditional sort, like our cinema, or a very kind of modern, high-spec lecture theatre, it is essentially a theatre. So from this perspective, the person at the sharp end of the performance is looking out at an audience arranged in serried rank, much as if they were at the cinema or the theatre or at a sporting event. And in a more traditional lecture space, you see more forcibly how all the paraphernalia of the theatre is there. The proscenium arch that divides the audience from what's going on stage, exits, stage left and stage right. If the baying crowds get too terrifying, even this modern theatre, there are two doors helpfully placed to the sides to allow the lecturer to escape. There is a backdrop, there is scenery in the form of the presentations. There is stage property, so we have a computer and a table, a board, marker and wiper. It is in almost every respect an exact replica of a theatrical environment. And that context demands a performance. We are culturally determined to expect to be entertained, to expect to be performed to if we're sitting in rows, because when we're not in an academic environment doing this, as I noted, we're at a play or a cinema or at some other form of entertainment. With that kind of relationship come expectations. So about this time every year, I agonise about whether or not I'm going to replace my football season ticket. It seems an awful lot of money to pay for an awful lot of disappointment and heartache. And of course, if the players, if the team doesn't perform, doesn't provide the sort of performance that the fans are expecting every Saturday, there is outrage and rioting and general kind of wall-to-wall bad behaviour, because it's seen as a waste of money, a scandalous waste of money. If, however, you're faced with a kind of strike fest, a 4-4 thriller, then you feel you've got your money's worth. Far more so, therefore, with our students who are paying very large amounts of money to go into these sort of spaces, to enter into this sort of relationship, expecting, because of how the whole thing is set up, to be entertained. And as entertainers, as performers, whether we like it or not, we should expect the kind of repercussions that fall on the heads of those who fail to live up to expectations. There is a sense of the loneliness of the stand-up comic being up in front of a large audience, which is failing to engage with what you are presenting them with. I think we've all kind of felt the sort of hunch feeling them, for whatever reasons, today it's not going well, beam me up, Scotty, how can I get out of this? So if we see the lecturing context, the experience of lecturing and being lectured to, as equivalent to other sorts of performance, what does that mean in terms of how we approach it? What lessons can we maybe learn from others who perform? Now, I'm not going to suggest what you think I'm going to suggest. There is a famous film that some of us who are old enough to remember will remember, where a bunch of kind of unlikely lads from Sheffield, out of work steelworkers, reinvent themselves as a kind of striptease group. And just before their final performance, the big one, Dave steps forward and he says in his best Sheffield, "We may not be very good, but we're here, we're live, and for one night only, we're going for full Monty." That's as good as that's as much as I'm going to miss. And the point is that watching a bunch of kind of flabby middle-aged men undress is hardly something that people would seek out on a regular basis. But the point is, it's live. It's an event. we're here, we're live. And the big difference between other forms of learning and the lecture is that in this kind of context, there is physical presence. And a live performance allows us to manipulate the medium, the context in which we are all sitting and engaging to reinforce the message. So a number of things occur to me as valuable to think about, given that emphasis on the physical presence, on the physical engagement. First of those is the fact that we are using our voice. I have a particular vested interest in the voice because much of my teaching over the years was in a subject known as phonetics, which is the study of speech sounds. So perhaps I have a greater kind of academic awareness of the use of the cavities in the head and different parts of the mouth and so forth. But we all need to be aware of our instrument, how best to use it. 50 minutes or an hour or 2 hours is a very long time to be playing an instrument. And it's a very long time in which muscles will get tired, things will become dry. So we owe it to ourselves as lifelong lecturers to have a good understanding of how best to use and how worst to use our voice. It's also important to learn how to speak clearly, the gentle art of elocution. Many of our students are non-native speakers of English, and no matter how quaint your thick Geordie accent might be, no matter how impressive your prestissimo rendition might be to certain audiences, one needs to be aware that those who are listening to us speak have certain challenges in terms of making sense of the sounds we're uttering that we ourselves might not experience. So, giving a performance, performing in a space requires an understanding of the means by which we perform. The second point to bear in mind is that we are indeed in a space. We need to understand whether we are audible in all parts of that room. If one has the time, then getting to know the lecture theatre in which we're teaching can pay real dividends, being aware of the acoustically dead areas, what kind of volume is appropriate and what isn't. A space also allows movement. I'm remaining quite static because I'm speaking into a microphone and this is being recorded, but no actor beyond the kind of wooden Amdram third-rater would stand stock still before an audience, and movement inspires engagement. It creates a kind of different spectacle. Obsessive, strange, sort of jerky movements and physical tics become fascinating things in their own right and draw attention away from what's being said, of course. But as well as being aware of one's voice, one needs to be aware of how one moves and appears. A physical space is also a shared reference point. The one thing we have in common is we're all in this space, and we all notice the damp patch on the wall, or the fact that it's raining outside, or the fact that someone's drawn a two-finger salute on the board and nobody's been able to rub it off properly. So don't deny the fact that the space is here as part of the shared experience. I think it's good to talk about it, to refer to it as part of that holistic experience of learning in a given context. And of course, the other thing that we have in common, that we wouldn't have in common if you were listening to this later online, is that we're in the here and now. So sirens are going off outside, people are clanking past in the corridor. Again, these are all important things to refer to be aware of, to reference as part of sharing in a common event, and it feeling like something that isn't me doing to you, but us all being in a situation together. The final thing to say about the live element of it is that every performance is different. We have our basic three resources, our spoken delivery, our physical aids, the handouts and the images on the screen, all of which of course should be complementary and not replicate each other. But that experience of all those different bits and pieces is going to mean that no one occasion is the same. If you give a lot of repeat workshops, you find yourself thinking, have I told this joke before? Did I tell it to this group? Or did I tell it to a different group? And the fact is that's because every workshop is different, has its own feel and dynamic. If lecturing is a performance, then what sort of model is it helpful for us to follow? What sort of performance are we giving? While on a Saturday evening I'm reading Latin poetry, the rest of my family are watching Britain's Got Talent, which of course provides a whole range of different types of performance, a whole range of different ways of engaging from a stage with an audience. The one type of performance that I know best, and I've found it helpful to kind of refer to as a source of ideas, is musical performance. Roland was kind enough not to make jokes about organs, which people seem to think are perennially funny, but as an organist I've heard them all before, and indeed I am an organist and I do quite a lot of concerts, and so I'm used to performing to an audience of a different sort. Engaging with an audience as an organist is particularly challenging because you're like the Wizard of Oz. Very often you're this sort of unprepossessing, invisible guy hidden away in a gallery or behind a pillar while the great machine roars at the audience. So trying to project to that audience is something that needs careful thought. And giving concerts has made me think about 3 Ps. The first P is programming. A concert, if it's to be interesting and engaging to an audience, can't just be a succession of random pieces that I happen to have in good enough performance state to play right now. There needs to be a shape to the programme, a coherence, an ebb and flow of loud and quiet and different keys and different periods of repertoire and so on. And it's important to think not only about one's audience and what's going to be appealing and attractive to one's audience, but also about the instrument. One of the problems of playing the organ is you can't just sort of stick your old trusty violin under your chin and start. Every organ is different, and that influences what kind of pieces you would play. So thinking about giving a lecture, preparing a lecture as preparing a programme, a varied programme that will continue to engage, I think can be quite helpful. The second P is preparation. Because I'm not rate good on the organ, I do have to practice hard and prepare hard, almost obsessively for a concert, and my recurrent nightmare isn't about, being kind of exposed by the Vice-Chancellor in a university committee meeting. It's always organ related, arriving at the wrong church or arriving at a concert hall and I can't find the on button for the organ. So this is a kind of sort of obsession in my unconscious. But because this sort of performance is something that does make me nervous, I need to make sure that I'm fully prepared. And being fully prepared in a lecture gives you freedom. If you know your material very well, of course, it's only then that you are able to depart from your script, that you can be a little bit more creative and referential. The great stars of organ performance are the improvisers, the people who seem to create a piece from nothing, who can sit down, be given a theme, and produce a fugue or a symphonic work. Well, they're not making it up from scratch every time. In fact, they are prepared to their eyeballs. They have a series of techniques that they can evolve and expand in order to create that impressive performance. The third point in terms of performing as an aspect of lecturing that I gain from musical performance is the third P, pretation, specifically interpretation. As a lecturer, as a musician, you are not a composer or a creator, you are interpreting other people's work. And it's your interpretation, it's your particular approach to the material, how you make it personal, that makes it special. And so to think about how one's own interpretation, you're not a kind of straight conduit for the facts. You are that specific version of it, and I think we should relish that and seek to capitalise on it. The closest parallel to lecturing, as I sort of slightly kind of painfully indicated earlier on, is being a stand-up comedian. There is a kind of loneliness, a sense of isolation, being on a stage with nowhere to hide, with only your material for cover. And we precisely should not be afraid of humour. And I'm not suggesting that we sort of reinvent ourselves as a kind of Bernard Manning figure. And any humour we use, of course, has to stem from who we are, the kind of humour, whether it be physical humour or verbal humour, that we find natural, that our friends enjoy in other environments. And it's very important that we don't leave aside the things that make us engaging to our friends when we enter the professional environment. At one stage, early on in my career, I worked as an organist in Norway, and the vicar of the churches where I was playing he was an absolute riot in his kind of Norwegian way. Incredibly good company, used to come round to my flat and nick my cigarettes in the days when I wasn't looking after my voice. And he was a witty, charming man who decided whenever he entered the pulpit that he had to become very kind of sacerdotal and professional, and he was hated by the congregations. What a waste, I thought, that he had this talent, this warmth, this engagement, which he didn't allow to suffuse his public performances. One obviously needs to be pretty confident of one's material and confident in one's own skin to allow humour to seep in, but red herrings, self-deprecation are all things that I've certainly found to be useful techniques. If the going's getting a bit heavy, let's talk about something else a little bit lighter for a bit, and the room kind of lights up and the tension lightens, and we're all back in the room. It's often easiest if you have a series of lectures when you can develop a persona, you can develop sort of ongoing points for humour. I've tended to kind of develop a bit of a motif of myself as this sort of stuffed shirt, this sort of has-been kind of Victorian, and that allows for a sort of lightness and self-mockery. And if you say something that's a bit silly, then you can say, "Oh, it's me again being a sort of pedantic old fool." I mean, it's not with any bastards, but it's an aspect of performance which I think can come to one's aid. You may feel that regarding lectures as stand-up comedy is to cheapen the art somewhat. So you might like to think of it more as part of the history of rhetoric, which is at the heart of education in the West from Roman times onward. The first three disciplines in an elementary education were grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And Quintilian, who was the great teacher of orators in Rome, regarded rhetoric as a holistic skill. So the orator became a public speaker through how they lived their lives, through how they dressed, as much as avoiding barbarisms and solecisms and all the other pitfalls of public speaking. And when we stand up in front of our audience in the lecture theatre, from the Greek word theatron, meaning seeing place, we are seen in the round. What we're wearing, if the material gets a bit heavy, all the audience has to focus on is, the dandruff on our collar or the sort of spot on our nose, and being aware of how you're coming across holistically is part of recognising that this is, whether we like it or not, a performance. So is this viewing of lecturing as performance, is it defensible, or am I just a sort of self-glorifying, self-important, amateur dramatic failure who's taking his sort of failures into the workplace? Well, I don't think so entirely. The linguistics that I research and talk about is something that I find fascinating. and I want other people to be fascinated by it, and I'm quite sure that's true of you and your disciplines and material as well. And in a sense, anything we can do to make it memorable, make it lively, make it different, must be brought to our aid. We need to find our inner performer and do almost whatever it takes to inspire our audience. Final point, and I'm afraid I have to kind of slip back to my real life as a bureaucrat in about 2 minutes and go and chair a meeting. But my final point I want to say is this isn't just something which relates to teaching, to student teaching. I was involved in a discussion a couple of years ago about effective researchers and effective teachers. What is it that makes people good teachers and good researchers? And it became clear after quite a lot of discussion that at the heart of both aspects of our job is performance and engagement. You can be Chomsky or whatever it is, all you like, but if you can't inspire an audience and use techniques to engage them, you might as well not have bothered. That's not the kind of researcher that I hope that I am. Not that I'm a brilliant researcher, but I think I have material which can reach people because I hope I'm able to engage people. So thank you very much for listening politely. It's been a pleasure to talk about teaching. I do a bit of teaching still, which is sort of an oasis in my life, but it's been a privilege to engage with you today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and I'll just now slip away. Thank you.